Welcome, and thank you for taking a few moments of your day to join us. I am Deborah Mendes, and I'm with TopStep. We have with us Ron Burrow and Chris Manchester. Welcome, gentlemen. Please introduce yourselves and a bit about your company, then I will let you take it from there.
Thanks, Deborah. Hi, I'm Ron Burrow. I'm the President and CEO of TopStep. TopStep is a NetSuite Alliance partner. Our focus in the NetSuite ecosystem is working with professional service organizations, helping them become efficient and profitable. And our tool of choice is NetSuite OpenAir product. And so we've been implementing and working with the OpenAir tool for many years now. We've figured out ways to have the OpenAir tool adapt to the CRO industry. And we'll cover how we accomplish that in later points. Chris?
Yeah, nice to meet everybody. My name is Chris Manchester. I am a NetSuite Alliance Director here at Sikich. I think the best way to describe Sikich, it's a global company specializing in technology-enabled professional services. So much like Ron's team, professional services organization with a lot of pillars and different models and business processes within those. We're just north of about 1,700 employees worldwide, and among of the largest CPA firms in the United States. A little bit about my background. I've actually been implementing NetSuite for about 15 years here, specializing in different industries and verticals, but more relevant to today's discussion, really getting involved with life sciences and specifically more on the kind of CRO element to the life sciences industry. So really excited to be on with Ron today and share what we can, and please ask questions.
Thanks, Chris. So our focus today is really solving challenges that we've come across in working with CROs. Some of the challenges we've run into is really from the beginning of the process. These CROs are out there negotiating these long, multi-year studies that are extremely complex and often, a challenge to manage. And working with them to come up with best practices, efficient ways to systemize these studies has been a lot of fun, and it's been a fun challenge. So, what we'll talk about in more detail is kind of from the beginning points, the study startup, how to take what they're planning to do and get it into a system. And then on a month-over-month basis, how the change orders impact what we've been working with them on. And then on a billing side, they have a very non-standard billing model and forecasting model that we will get more into detail with. Chris, tell us a little bit about the financial side that you've seen for these CROs.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And just to kind of set up how, today is going to, how Ron and I are going to interact, I'm going to take more of the financial aspect of what we're seeing across the CRO industry, especially in the mid-market, and Ron's going to take kind of the execution and operational side. But I think there's some general themes that go across both. From kind of my point of view, what we're seeing is a very piecemealed approach to ERP and managing all of the back end solutions that have to surround things like study startup and billing and change orders. We're often seeing the piecemeal approach due to things like acquisitions, right? There's a lot of kind of M&A activity that we're seeing across the market, folks entering kind of new markets or amalgamating with larger organizations, and getting swallowed up. So we're seeing this kind of contract and expand type model, and I think that leads to a lot of disparate systems that float across there. I think another reason is organic growth, right? So as a CRO thinks about their growth projections and where they can become more profitable, right? They often think about expanding into new revenue streams, and those revenue streams might be new disease areas or phases of the clinical trial that they're supporting, or capabilities, whether that be more research-based, manufacturing-based, and we've seen the gamut there. So I think we're we're seeing this slew of systems that aren't often strategically thought out and put together, that people are kind of band-aiding and getting buy-in. Obviously, that prohibits true growth and accuracy as we think about scalability of these organizations. I think the other thing too is, just from a common theme, we're seeing that ERP often gets overlooked, right? And I think there are real reasons for that, and good reasons, right? So that we see a lot of organizations that are focused on other operational systems that are critical to the business, things like LIMS systems, CTMSs, document storage, patient communication, patient experience, right? And we've seen the gamut of solutions that kind of surround the CRO market and how to stay competitive there. So, I don't, it's not the blame game. I think there are real reasons, but, oftentimes that causes a lacking on the back end and really organizational inefficiency when it comes to things like billing and revenue recognition, which we'll talk about more on a bit later. So just to kind of set up, what kind of themes that we'll go through from a financial perspective as we get through this webinar. So, I think we kind of outlaid what we're thinking from an overview perspective. Ron, when I read news articles and everything I see online these days, whether it's LinkedIn or across the various other applications, I see study startup as a common theme. And how do we make that process more efficient? Study startup can obviously span multiple different systems, but from our perspective, right, how are you starting to think about and address continuous improvement around study startup, and what can organizations look to us to help achieve there?
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Good question. So what I'll say is, as we've been introduced to these CROs and started talking through what their process is today, there's been a common theme. And what we've found is all these studies typically live in Excel, and they're managing them in Excel today in these very large, very complex workbooks. And that's from the quoting side, building out the study with all the details. These studies typically are delivering what they all refer to as units. They're basically a labor-based work product that they're going to deliver at certain quantities based on what they're negotiating with their customers. And they're very complex. They can be hundreds of lines long and multiple years long. And so Excel is a great tool for putting together the study and getting the client sign off to agree to the study. But what Excel fails is executing the study. So how to kind of systemize that workbook. And so we have a system that can support the study was a real key for us, is trying to figure that out. And so what we've done is taken our expertise with OpenAir as a professional service automation tool. And we've come up with a way to automate the creation of these studies inside of OpenAir through an upload process. Now, we've done it a few different ways for each of our customers, but basically it boils down to taking all the details of a study, the detailed units being delivered, the timelines, the budgets, the resource requirements, all the different areas of the study, and then getting those into a spreadsheet that we then import into OpenAir in an automated fashion. And that creates a study, creates all the details of a study, creates the timelines, the budgets, the resource requirements. And now you've got a system that is now where the study lives, that's built for managing these studies and projects. And so now at that point, we can use standard functionality, and we can go in and we can update the studies. And we've got everyone now has visibility real time to what those studies look like, and how they're managed. They can be reported on real time. And so now you're not fat fingering a spreadsheet by mistake. There's lots of eyes on it, and it's a real benefit to moving out of spreadsheets, getting into a system and systemizing these studies, and from a startup through execution.
So I have to ask, Ron, have you ever had a client's machine Excel crash because there were too many VLOOKUPs or too many macros embedded in it?
Absolutely.
Just a few times, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I do, I have Excel when we're working with a lot of these CROs, you're obviously dealing with a ton of data and Excel can only stretch so far.
Yeah.
So yeah, Excel can be a challenge.
No, we've seen it. So kind of compounding on top of that, Ron, we have now the ability to establish the study. And, it's funny because Sikich also works with a lot of early stage biotechs and pharma life sciences clients that interact with the CROs from a, vendor partner relationship. So we kind of see both sides of the coin. And one of the swear words, right, that we often hear come out of this is change orders.
Oh,
We we know they're inevitable, right? I think they happen quicker than they used to from a frequency perspective because we're getting results so much faster, right, from other operational systems that we have to react and respond to those, not just from from a drug development or whatever it is we're working on perspective, but also from a back end perspective to say how does that impact things like financials and forecasting and such. How do you think about managing change orders and what does that process look like for you?
yeah. So that was a learning curve for us to really understand the impact of these change orders, and it's the volume of change orders for the CROs is higher than any other customers that we work with in other industries. And I can understand why. You're building these studies, they're multi-year, and inevitably they're going to change. You ordered, so many clinical labs that you think you're going to deliver, and then in month 2 decide where you're going to remove some clinical labs and add some other units, and the value of the project may change. It may go up, it may go down. So it's a constant moving of trading out or adding additional units throughout the life of the study. And having the visibility of what was the originally sold and what changed, what was the impact to budgets of the overall project, as well as the budgeted units, how that affects forecasting and billing is quite complex and was quite a big problem that we really had to spend a lot of time understanding. And of course, it's different for every CRO. Every CRO treats it different. But the common theme was we have to be able to deal with change orders, and we have to come up with a way to work with them. And we've come up with a few different ways we've satisfied that with some customers, depending on the frequency and the change order impact to the study. But basically similar to what we came up with study startup. Is taking the change order information and uploading it so that it's not a manual process. And really, that's what we've been trying to really focus on, is getting rid of as much manual process. So having a separate change order document that identifies we're going to be reducing this unit, but we're going to be adding this unit, having that detailed in a spreadsheet, uploading that into the project, and then being able to update the budgets, right? We can track different budgets. We have budgets starting on day 1 that is $6 million, and now it's $6,200,000, and we can see the changes in budgets over the life of the project. We can also track what changed and when it changed, using reporting and other views in the system. So that's really good. We've also done with some customers where they want the change to be a sub project. So we create kind of a portfolio of projects for a study where the initial study is created, but then as changes are created, we create change sub projects that we can track what's changed, but then those feed the main projects, so those updates are made, and that gives them some visibility, a little more visibility in what was changed. So it's been a creative process. It's been a lot of fun solving that change order problem. It is a 4-letter word for all these CROs. But it's a reality of their business, and it's something we've really focused on. And I think we've got a few good options using OpenAir and our technical team to overcome those. So Chris, you mentioned piecemeal approach and overlooking the financials. When we're engaging these CROs, we're kind of focused on the execution. and a lot of the upfront reporting and the changes that we need to be able to track. We don't normally get too far down into the financial side of the equation. And I know that's key importance, and that's really where you guys focus. Can you go into a little more detail around what you've seen from those piecemeal and overlooking and how you solve that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can touch upon some of the areas that I think are critical to what we look for, in combination with your execution pieces, because I don't think they can happen in silos either, right? So certainly, you could completely automate the project to cash cycle, but I think if the back end is not stable, you're still going to be lacking, right? And not getting the output that folks are looking for these days in the analytics. So I think to touch upon some of the areas that we go over, certainly I'll call it sales management or CRM, right? What does the upfront bidding process look like? Do we have something like Salesforce in the mix, that folks are tracking leads and prospects and opportunities, building out sophisticated quotes? Because we know, right, a lot of these bid grids and the complexity that we're seeing in Excel, starts somewhere, right? So we're often seeing a fairly complex, estimating quoting process that ultimately has to flow into both of our environments to be able to execute. So I think sales management is a big one in terms of what are we doing from a CRM perspective. Certainly, we look at things, and probably the most important are financials. And I know it sounds a little cliche, but background is accountant by nature, so I can't kick it yet. But certainly, I think as we're seeing it, more of these CRO organizations are global organizations made up of multiple legal entities, whether that's acquisition based or whether they're breaking them up for financial strategic reasons like taxes. We're seeing that operations may span different countries, different legal entities, and there are accounting challenges that correlate with some of those decisions. The other thing from a financial perspective is we want to be able to run the output of the business the way that CROs want to see that. And what I mean by that is, really as simple as every time a CFO said I wanted to be able to run a P&L by, and that might be things like department or division, revenue stream, disease indicator. NetSuite does a really nice job of helping us identify, or giving us the flexibility, I should say, to identify what segments we're tracking, what's important to us, how do we want to run profitability, how do we want to segment our expenses, right down to the project level. If we don't get the financials right, I think that doesn't bode well for the rest of the project. So that's sort of the core backbone of it, in terms of what we're focusing on first. And we can talk about things like phasing and such later, but certainly an area that we touch upon quite heavy. The other thing too is, there's all these things that surround the ERP, and CRO organizations, we sometimes we think of them as professional services organizations. Yes, they have very unique billing scenarios and they have bid grids and things like that we need to capture, but they also have similar needs to other pro serve organizations. So things like procurement and inventory control, right? Some CROs are tracking inventory or managing things like compounds and kits or reagents. And we need to be able to store those. We need to be able to store those potentially on our balance sheet and potentially tie those to the project, from a project profitability to where we're tying up inventory, and have kind of visibility of that inventory lifecycle within the environment. So again, very ERP centric type functionality, but could be very applicable to the CRO organization itself. And I think the last part, Ron, is just I want to stress how important our interaction is between project management, right? Certainly you're handling things like the project change orders and the execution of it, but it's not like, one system's handling it and the other one has no idea about it. It's actually a very tight integration. And that's something, Ron's team and our team stress quite heavily, because there's invoicing information getting passed back and forth. Certainly there's revenue recognition rules that we need to abide by if we're, recording revenue in advance of billing, or, potentially recording revenue after billing should have occurred. So, I think there's gaps there. And with, what we typically see with flexible billing models comes flexible revenue recognition arrangements. So we need to be able to encapsulate all those. And, I think from there, there's a lot more touch points that certainly Ron and I can get into, but it's all based on requirements, things like time, expenses, and how much information are we tracking in the ERP versus how much are we tracking in OpenAir. Those are some of the areas that we truly have best practices around. So we don't integrate the world just to do it. We do it based on need and based on kind of best practice and experience. But I don't want folks to overlook how important that tie-in is between these systems. So I think, certainly we can go into 100 more topics related to ERP and CROs, but those are kind of the important ones that I wanted to call out in terms of what we're typically going over. Now, I think when Ron and I met years back, we started talking about this concept of unit-based billing that we heard over and over, as a part of CROs. And we really needed to understand what it was, and it turns out it's simple in concept, but it's not terribly simple to roll out from an ERP from a project management execution perspective. And that's why if you jump on Google, there's no silver bullet right now for ERP, let's say in the mid-market for CROs, right? These are things that are going to have to be built and somewhat configured to your environment because, again, we're seeing discrepancies and variability across. So Ron, you want to talk to us a little bit about, unit-based billing and, just as important, the forecasting that goes along with that from a billing and a revenue perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. It was my biggest surprise, and as we're trying to understand the challenges, that there's not a really system out there that is built to handle these unit billings. So everybody is playing in Excel, and that's terrifying to know that your billing output, what you're sending to your customer, is based on someone going in and getting the Excel correct. And what we learned is, as they plan these unit deliveries, right? We're going to deliver these many units of this type of solution month over month over month. And then they would go into Excel and say, okay, did we deliver these in this month? And you're talking, again, hundreds and hundreds of unit types. And then someone would take that information and then say, okay, now let's manually cobble together an invoice based on what's in Excel. And that is not a recipe that I would want to continue to do month over month. I can imagine the hours and the errors and the mistakes that could be made in that process. So what we did was we took, OpenAir has this concept of a resource booking, and we basically copied it and manipulated it into unit bookings. So what we do now is by uploading the project and all the unit tasks, we can now plan out the unit delivery in the systemized way, almost like a resource for each type of unit that we're going to deliver. And by doing that, we can go in and say, okay, we said we were going to deliver 5 units in the month of March, but we actually only delivered 4. So we're going to update 4 units, and we're going to move 1 out to a future month. And then you can go in and tag the current month as saying these are ready to bill, and go in and do a tag of that ready to bill. And then we wrote a customization that takes those units. We know the cost of each unit because we have all that budget data stored through the upload process. And then we basically create charges in OpenAir from the planned units, the delivered units for a period. From there, you use standard OpenAir functionality. We create the invoices, we submit the invoices for approval, and then those approved invoices get ported over to NetSuite, where they then gets delivered to the customer. So it's using a lot of standard functionality, but the converting of units delivered to unit dollars is something that my technical team developed. And it works really well. And we've implemented this for several customers, several CROs, and it saves them a ton of time because now, again, everyone is living in the same system. Everyone has eyes on it. There's lots of checks and balances that people can have where they didn't before. And even if I say I delivered these many units and then they go to the invoicing process, they're going to come back for a final review. You've got another opportunity to confirm that you haven't missed anything and before it gets into the financial system. So that process has been a real win for all the CROs we've worked with collaboratively, and it works really well. But equally, if using that same process, we're shuffling future units too.
Yeah.
And if I've only delivered 4 and I thought I was going to deliver 5, right? We can spread the units into future periods. We can go into a spreadsheet looking grid that's set month over month, and I can just point and click like a spreadsheet, move units from one period to another based on how we expect to deliver that. Well, that's great from forecasting when the units are going to be delivered, but we also need to be able to forecast the dollars associated with those deliveries to say, if we deliver what we think, what is our billing forecast for the month of May, June, July, etc. And so what we do there is we use all standard functionality within OpenAir. OpenAir has what's charge projections, and it creates automatic forecasts using billing rules. And we create those billing rules through the upload process. So none of this is manual. It's all part of the upfront study setup. And it just, each night the billing rules refresh, the projections refresh, and we can run reports to say, what is our forecast of units being delivered in future periods? And again, a lot of eyes on those reports. It allows you to be able to say, is this right? Are we really doing this? It gives people the ability to question the accuracy. Key financial reporting that you couldn't get done otherwise, except very manual. It's been another big win for our CROs that we've worked with to be able to get that forecasting of unit billing right out of OpenAir. So Chris, let me throw it back to you. What are some of the practical steps CROs can do to transition from what they're doing today? We get involved and, we hear about their current state and we want to get them to a more strategic, efficient state. What are some of the key steps you see to be able to transition those from the current to a more strategic, efficient processes?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, Ron, it's probably a function of getting you and I out of the conversation so we're not scaring everybody with how much functionality we're projecting here. But no, I think the number one thing I can talk about is phasing, right? So, we need to understand that typically, an ERP replacement and a project management upgrade is not a small feat to get into an organization. We understand that, right? Especially in the mid-market, you don't have teams designated to these projects that are FTE 100% full go on this, and that's okay. And we understand that. We build project plans around it. But oftentimes we talk about phasing, and phasing may take on a number of different hats. Certainly, a common approach would be to say, well, let's get financials up and running first to make sure we're stable from a general ledger perspective, from a segment perspective, from a legal entity structure, to make sure that we can, record these transactions and these outputs coming from various systems in an efficient and accurate manner. So again, I'm not looking to kind of put a phasing plan together for you, but just to give you some examples of what we've done in the past. I think a lot of these things too can happen parallel because we're going to be asking very similar questions around things like project profitability and billing and revenue recognition, the touch points, right, that are going to cross these applications and these solutions naturally. So, I think number one is we want to make sure that we're positioning the execution of projects like this as not disruptive to your business, right? We know that, there's a lot going on, there's month ends, there's audits, and, you still might be living in that manual kind of Excel nightmare for a certain period of time. We always say, well, the faster we get out of there, the quicker you can start doing kind of your real job and analyzing the results of this as opposed to kind of building the data. So, I think, again, I'm a bit of a broken record here, but we'll certainly work with your team to understanding what phasing looks like, if that's something that we can introduce, and would it benefit your organization. A lot of times what we're seeing is that phasing is very beneficial because there might be areas that, again, you're using Excel or you're using manual processes. So we're not taking you back a step in terms of functionality while we're implementing these systems. It might be that, hey, continue to use this manual process up until we're at point X of the project, and then we can layer in that piece and automate the billing or automate the revenue recognition. So, our team spends a lot of time on things like strategic roadmaps and digital transformation, but also things like change management and how that impacts the organization. So we very much top of mind as we approach these to make sure we understand that, again, this is not your full-time job. The other thing too, kind of a cool story that we've had is we implemented a CRO kind of years back, and shocking, they were acquired by a larger CRO. And in doing that, they were going to be transitioned onto a tier one application that the acquiring company was on. But what they realized is that for their business, they couldn't mimic the functionality that was built, right? And the efficiencies and the way they ran their business on, NetSuite and OpenAir in the tier one solution, right? The monolith ERP. So they actually had to keep it up and running, and they simply went with a two-tier approach and fed in financials on a month-to-month basis, and that works tremendous for their organization. So, creativity is certainly an area that we get into here, and making sure we're addressing the right needs with the right solutions, and that the total cost of ownership is there to kind of make sure that this makes sense for the organization. So, I think, a few things there, Ron, but, certainly phasing, think about the end result, reporting capabilities, dashboards, and potentially, two-tier approaches for when we run into that kind of mergers and acquisition story. But Ron, I'll kind of spin it. Same sort of question. What do you think about in terms of, value proposition when you're talking to a CRO?
I mean, everything you've said applies to everything, that we both do together with our customers. It's understanding the overall current architecture and all the different products. We worked with a lot of them where they got some of the data in one system, some of the data is in another system, like they're entering time in this other system that's not connected to the studies. So, they can't cobble together any profitability. Are they being efficient in their delivery? Do they even know what's going on? So it's understanding all the different areas and being able to pull together kind of a cohesive architecture with OpenAir and NetSuite at the heart that is really configured for maximizing the CROs. And, I think phasing it is always a good approach to come in. Often we'll go NetSuite first to get the NetSuite side of the house set up and ready to go before we tackle the more execution side of the house. And really understanding how they work together, but then maybe phasing the work. So that's pretty common. We just did that with an overseas CRO where they went NetSuite. We were parallel, but NetSuite kind of went live before the OpenAir piece went live because they were ready to go, and we were still kind of configuring and working on data for OpenAir, and that worked really well because although they were still kind of entering time in this other system and they were still managing their studies in Excel, we were not interrupting as the big part of the finance business was able to concentrate on the financial system. And then when we needed them to concentrate on the financial components of the execution solution of OpenAir, they were available to do that. And they knew how they wanted it to impact NetSuite from a tight integration perspective. So that worked really well. And for this organization. So
that slight offset, Ron, was very valuable to that organization.
It was.
Even that, yeah.
We wouldn't have been as successful as we were without that slight offset because we would have been competing for resources.
Certainly.
And we would have been kind of a moving target on the NetSuite side that OpenAir would have had to accommodate, and that's never a good opportunity. So that offset was, although not planned, admittedly, it was a happy accident that we learned a lot of lessons from for sure. So that was a good thing. So I agree. CROs are they know what they want. They know what they need. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of solutions out there, but fortunately, they have a good option with TopStep and Sikich and our combined solution focusing on CROs. So Chris, thank you for participating today. It's been great to get your insights, and I really appreciate it.
No, I love catching up with you, Ron, and please do, feel free to ask questions and we'll get those answered as best we can.
Yeah, so thanks again. So we will be checking now to see if we have any questions for Chris or I, and we'll go through those. So we do have a few questions, Chris.
Yep.
One question is will you show the solution? Unfortunately, I don't think we have the time today to demo the solution. If you are interested in seeing the solution, feel free to contact Chris or myself, and we would be happy to set up a focused meeting to show you what we've done. Chris, this might be a good question for you. Is this similar as a FP&A tool?
I would say similar, but not the same. So, certainly as we think about ERP, there are intrinsic differences between ERP and FP&A. When I think about FP&A is more of a true budgeting tool with forecasting, budget to actual reporting, which NetSuite does have some of these capabilities. So I don't want to downplay. But where an FP&A tool kind of shines is more with things like distributed budgeting, what if scenarios, multiple budgets, multiple versioning, if you're doing kind of rebudgeting, and that's very financial based. Now, I will say, part of this too is, Ron's tool does have the ability to put together revenue and billing forecasts that can feed into FP&A type solutions to kind of forecast out your revenue. So they are similar in that regard. So there's kind of a lot of answers to that. And then to compound this, NetSuite has a budgeting tool that you can effectively upload budgets and do budget to actual reporting on. So those are areas that we didn't focus on, heavily in terms of the webinar, but we have solutions that surround it, and we interact with it quite a bit, as we think about what we're proposing here.
Yeah, it's a good answer. Another question, is this system integrated to other ones and to CRO platforms? I'll take the first part of this, Chris.
Sure.
Both OpenAir and NetSuite have open APIs. So we're able to access those APIs to be able to connect to other systems. As an example, for a few of the CRO projects I've worked on, they use Salesforce on the front end to manage these study opportunities, as well as capture change orders as changes are made as well. And we've built several integrations from Salesforce to OpenAir or from other CRMs to OpenAir to kind of start to feed that initial project object in at the point where they're ready to start the resource planning, unit planning activities. But there's also been other systems we were able to do. Pretty much anything with a modern API can be connected to. Chris, I don't know if you've seen anything on the NetSuite side specific to CROs.
So yeah, so I'd say, we've seen probably various systems over the years, Ron, everything from homegrown systems that do have API connectivity to LIMS systems. I'd say anything that, maybe potentially could trigger a billing event or a revenue recognition event. Those are areas that, I think we would probably want to explore further to see if, those are things that we can automate. A lot of teams are downloading Excel and uploading or doing it manually as well. It all depends on volume, right? And the ROI has to be there. But I could probably get into 100 other integrations like HCM solutions if they're doing human capital management, employee management. Ron, I'm assuming that would be a potential tie-in to OpenAir, and expense management tools that. I don't think that these are terribly CRO focused in nature, more generic. But I'll kind of mimic Ron's point that both NetSuite and OpenAir were built for the cloud, modern architecture, with really good API connectivity. We don't see just common platforms from CRO to CRO. I feel like they all have slightly different systems. So it's almost dependent on kind of your environment, your setup. That would intrigue us to say, hey, this is worthy of an integration or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I should have mentioned HCM. That's a pretty popular one too,
Yeah, right.
especially around resource and user management.
Yep, time off management, things of that sort, right? Yep.
Right. You need to know when people are not going to be able to be working.
Yep.
Another question, if the company implements the solution, but they're not a CRO, how can they take advantage of it? I would say what Chris and I have been talking about today, although we've been focused on CROs, the solutions that we have today are not specific to CROs. All of the ways that we approach our projects, the philosophies, the consulting services, they are available to all industries, all service industries. The technology we use, for example, for the startup solution, where we take spreadsheets of data and we get that data uploaded into OpenAir. We've done that for several customers, not CROs, just because they've got a need to convert data into a platform. So a lot of the things we've been talking about today, especially on the OpenAir side, and I'll let Chris comment on the NetSuite side, can be really applied across industries. These are just some specific CRO challenges that we've been working with CROs on.
Yeah, no, I'll mimic that same thing to say, if it's a professional services organization, many, if not all of these concepts apply. There might be some niche things that we did, to focus on CROs specifically, but you're right, Ron. I think, from a professional services industry, these are two top players in the market, in terms of handling professional services. So it can be quite a bit more generic than CRO.
Yeah, so there's one last question it looks like. What's the timeline when executing a project like this? Chris, what have you seen?
Yeah, so I'd say, and don't hold me to the grindstone because, I get the phone call to say, hey, you told me I could do it in this time frame. I typically say we're in the 8 to 10 month deployment. And for an ERP, that's pretty rapid, right? So if you think about your tier one solutions, you're well over a year, going into these. We do like this concept of speed to value, and that's why we probably focused on phasing quite a bit in our presentation. So, that 8 to 10 month could be iterative go lives, right? As we talked about with financials and then layering on project management, and going on, so on and so forth. So as fast as we can onboard you onto these systems, we do, because we want you to get reap the benefits of them. And also quite simply because they're a subscription, right? So you're paying for them as we go, right? And we want you to, again, value ROI and all those things. So, I think that would be a typical time frame. Certainly there are things that could push, that could pull in. Data conversion is always a big one that we talk about, staff availability, and there's a million other, kind of risks and intrinsic risks built into these. But that I would say that would be a good time frame.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it also weighs heavy on the number of systems that are talking to each other, right? The more systems that are involved, CRM, HCM, budgeting tools, obviously that amps up the complexity, although it also amps up the efficiency. But it does take time to make sure we don't rush and we do it right. So yeah, I'm with you there. It does vary, but that's a good thumbnail. Well, this has been fun, Chris. Appreciate it.
Agreed.
Thanks everybody for joining today. We will be releasing the recording on our collective websites. And thanks everyone. Have a great rest of your day.